Welcome back to Always Learning. What are we doing today? Well, today we're learning about how to fix a nail hole. And you probably got nail holes where you're rearranging or redecorating the house, and you'll have a nail hole and you're trying well, how do I fix that so it looks good, and how do I repaint that? And so that's what I'm going to show you today. I've got some that we're basically just moving some pictures around. So there's two products that I use. One is Drydax. It comes when it comes out of the can, it's bright pink like the lid, and then as it dries, it turns white. So it'll tell you when it's ready to be sanded. And I typically use this when I've got a deeper hole. And then there's another product of spackling. It's a little lightweight, it's really airy. It dries quickly and it doesn't shrink as much as the Drydax, and it's called Fast and Final. And this is when you've got really small nail holes. You can literally putty those nail holes with the spackling and then come right back in 30, 45 minutes, wipe it down with a wet paper towel or a rag, and you're good to ready to start priming and painting. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is anytime you have a nail hole, you want to make sure that nothing is protruding out and it's all flush against the wall. So you simply just take your blade and you're going to push up really hard to make sure that there's no loose paper. You can see here, this one kind of sticks out a little bit. And if it does that, these smaller ones, you're good to go. We're just going to put a little Fast and Final in them, and they'll be good to go. If anything sticks up a little bit, you'll want to take the end of your blade here and just basically tap it so that it makes an indentation. So when you come in with your spackling and you come flush, that now will be covered up. If there's any kind of paper sticking up, just kind of poke that. You want it clean, and you want it recessed lower than what your level's going to be. And that's pretty much it. That's how you do the quick wall prep. One down here, I don't know if you can see it, but same thing. I'm just banging it in and getting it flush. So then I'll come in here with the Fast and Final for these smaller holes. I could probably do that one, but I'll show you how the pink stuff works. You're going to take your blade. I just take a small amount, and you literally just basically push it in the hole and then come down to 45. So I'm going to push it in. I've got product on my blade. I'm going to push it in, and then I literally come back at a 45-degree angle and wipe it off. And if you have a little bit there, or you'd rather leave too much than not enough, because you can always kind of sand or wipe it off with a paper towel. Get a little more, put that in there. As you can see, about as fast as you can go, you can fill all the little tiny nail holes with the Fast and Final. If you don't have one of these blades, you literally, for this, you could use a razor blade, or you could usually use a kitchen knife to get it flat, and then put the product in there. You could put it in with a gift card or a credit card, and I'll show you that as well. All right, so it's hard to see kind of how I took my blade. I literally just took the corner of it, and I just hammered it in right like that to make an indentation, to make sure that there was just a bigger dimple so it wasn't there. That's really it. It's hard to see on the other video, so I'll go ahead and show you. And as I said, if you don't have a blade, this is an AMC gift card. It's probably like $4 on it, and it's probably, I don't even know if they're back in business yet. So we'll use that. Same thing, you just get a little putty on there. You're gonna come up here, you're gonna push it in, and then you're simply gonna use it to come down. You can see there's just a little bit how that's raised up. And that's fine. You wanna get a little more, when you're using this Drydax, you're going to want to get a little thicker, and we're going to come back and sand it. But you want it kind of popped up and raised, because it's going to shrink. And it doesn't matter if there's some ridges. But you can see, you can put it on the wall, and then you literally can scrape it right back off. This is nice if you're just kind of beginning and you want to make sure you're kind of not going to how would I word this? So Drydax is kind of nice from one thing. It takes a little longer. Like I said, it's going to set up in about a couple hours, 45 minutes to an hour. So, but it goes from pink to white. So when it's all white, and the center part here where it's a little thicker is going to take a little longer. But what's nice about it is you'll know that your wall is smooth because it'll fill in and shrink. You'll come in and sand it with a sponge, I'll show you, or a piece of sandpaper, and then you'll reapply to fill in this gap when it shrinks. And so when you're done though, you'll know, or at least it's easier to tell, that you're not going to have an indention in your wall when you go to paint. And if you do, it's not that big a deal. People get all worked up about it. If you do have an indention when you go back and paint, just come back over it, fill it in with Fast and Final, sponge it, and then repaint it. Here's another hole. This one was actually made by one of those white screws where you screw it into the wall, it anchors it, and then you screw the screw in there. It's a little more heavy duty and it has a bigger wall damage. So you're gonna come in here and I'm gonna scrape to make it flush, get rid of all that paper, and then it sticks up a little bit, so I'm just gonna take that in and I'm just gonna bang it in a little bit. No problem, didn't really damage the paper. Same thing over here. I got a spot that where somewhere I did before is starting to kind of come loose, so I'm just gonna take all that out, kind of redo it as well when I'm in there. It's like obviously a big hole. I take my blade, simply gonna push it. I'm gonna fill it. You can fill it with your finger if you wanted to, and then I'm simply gonna come across to make sure I've got that filled, and it will shrink. Both these are gonna shrink, that's fine. Just be patient. The big thing is when you're doing drywall is to plan ahead. What happens is everybody gets in a hurry because they didn't plan ahead or leave enough time and they're wanting to get everything painted. So plan ahead, you know, do your drywall a couple days ahead of time. So when it comes time to paint, you're not scrambling trying to do it. If you are one of those people, you might want to switch over to a product which is called Sheetrock 45, and you literally mix it. You mix it up like putty with water or plaster Paris, and then you put it on there and it goes on hot. So within 45 minutes, it's ready to sand, ready to prime, ready to paint. Kind of like Drydax, but you can put it on thicker. So if I was in a hurry, I could use Sheetrock 45. Put that on both of these, come back in 45 minutes, sand it, be ready to prime and paint that day. So that'd be a product you'd want to check into. It comes usually in pretty big bags, but I did notice online you can get it smaller at some of your big box stores like Lowe's and Home Depot. It's probably hard to tell, but this is where the Fast and Final kind of highlighted here. I'm just going to take a wet washcloth, a little towelette, and just kind of come across to make sure there's no rough ridges. And if there's a little bit of a dimple, it's not that big a deal because I'm gonna put primer on it, I'm gonna put 2 coats of paint on it, and I'm gonna roll it, so it should help hide that. This is where I had the pink stuff, the Drydax, and as you can see, it's not quite finished here it's still pink a little bit here, so I'm gonna let that dry, but I'm gonna go ahead, and this is just a sponge sander, just a sponge little square pad, and I'm just going to come and knock down to make sure that this is smooth. I'm just lightly going over it. You can come back even with a damp cloth as well and just hit it a little bit on the edges to make sure that that's gone as well. And that's really about it. I'll probably come back here in about 15 minutes when it's totally dry and hit that with the Fast and Final to smooth in that little dimple, and then come back, prime it, and paint it. That's it, it's pretty simple. And right here, as you can see, is another one where I have the Fast and Final, and I'm just gonna come up and simply go across it with the wet cloth and just take off any of the high spots that they have left. And then when that'll dry quickly, I'll come back and hit that with a little bit of primer and paint. That's so light, you probably wouldn't even have to hit it with the primer, but if you're a perfectionist and a high-level painter, you're going to want to hit that with just a little bit of primer because it'll flash through. The spackle will actually pull the pigment of the paint if you don't prime it, and you'll get a flash spot where it'll show light and look a little bit different. Where if you hit it with just a little bit of primer, it'll the pigment then will grab onto the top of the place where you put the primer, and then it'll blend in more of the wall. And I'll show you kind of how to do that here in a second. One thing about the pink stuff for the Dexdry is you're going to get, when you sand it, you're going to get drywall on the floor, but it's pretty easy to vacuum up. Don't really worry about if you have powder or residue on the wall, because when you add the primer, that's actually a lot of times going to make your primer thicker, and actually the more expensive primer is a little thicker, so it's just going to actually improve your primer, so don't really worry about that. All right, so I've got some primer on the brush. I'm simply going to brush it over, kind of want to fan it real lightly so I don't try to take off as many brush marks as I can. You can hit these if you need to. Like I said, this fast and final, you probably don't need to do it as much. As you can see here, there's an area it shows up a little flatter. Then it doesn't look like it was rolled, and it's because I came in, had to patch a previous hole. It didn't really matter as much because there's a frame going over. There was a frame going over it to cover it up, so I wasn't worried about it. But now, since there's not going to be a frame here, what I'm going to do is when I paint the final paint color, this Revere Pewter, I'm going to come back in with the roller and just roll it out so that it has a little bit of texture to it. Instead of it being a flat look, and then it should blend in better with the entire wall. Here I'm just coming in with a coat of paint. You just want to make sure you get it covered really well. I'm going to do the same thing for the second coat. You're just going to repeat this process, but you're just going to come in, you want to make sure you roll it. That way it gets the same texture that was on the wall before. I prefer a wool roller. It's a little stronger nap, just to kind of blend it in and rough it up. If you don't, you're going to possibly see brush strokes, and you're also going to see a flat spot because your drywall probably had a little bit of texture on it as well. And you just do this across all your other places where you've done repairs at. I got the primer on the drywall, and then I put the first coat of paint on, and as you can see here, and it's kind of hard to tell, but if you look closely, you can see where it's raised up. So this is a good time kind of to go over your wall. If you want it perfectly smooth, kind of assess it. There's a bump here, I'm gonna knock that down. So you just kind of assess, you want it perfectly smooth, and then come back for the final coat. So like I said, I'm gonna knock that down with the sanding block, and then I'll get the final coat on and show you what that looks like. Here's what the final product looks like with 2 coats of paint on it. So easy product. Just don't be afraid to mess up. If you do, just do it again. It's pretty simple. You can't really screw it up. Anyway, like and subscribe. Hit the little bell if you'd like to get notifications. Thanks for watching.